I said at the top of the show that, now the Albanese government is coming after our farmers. It's this global warming madness. And you wouldn't perhaps mind what the Albanese government was doing about global warming if it at least seemed to know what it was actually on about. Well, I don't think that's actually the case. Today, the Prime Minister was again blaming the war in Ukraine for your gas prices soaring last year, with more price rises of another 20% or more coming over the next 2 weeks.
What we're seeing, of course, is a spike in gas prices as a direct result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That is what we're dealing with at the moment.
Well, that excuse is about to run out big time, because international gas prices are in fact now lower than they were 1 year ago, before that war in Ukraine. Not higher, lower. Although, of course, a lot of the gas suppliers have signed new contracts when prices were high, so that's being fed through the system. What's more, it was just a month ago that Treasurer Jim Chalmers and Energy Minister Chris Bowen promised that they would keep price rises down by putting a cap on the price of wholesale gas. They boasted that with these policy interventions, just last December, retail gas prices wouldn't rise as much. They'd go up by around 18% this financial year, with most of this increase, they said, having already occurred, which turns out to be totally wrong. We're only halfway through the financial year and gas prices have risen not 18%, but much more already in Queensland and New South Wales. And Victorians have just learned that their own gas prices will next month jump by more than 20%. And that's on top of the rises so far. So the government clearly has no clue about what's going on because, well, remember also this fake promise from the Prime Minister before the election.
And cheap renewable power will mean household bills drop by an average of $275 by 2025.
Won't happen. Joining me is National Senator Matt Canavan, former Resources Minister, who correctly predicted that all these Labor promises and schemes would fail or be broken. Matt Canavan, lovely to see you and Happy New Year to you. First time we've talked since the break. International prices for liquid natural gas, they're now lower than they were before the war in Ukraine. The government's also put in a price cap. So why do you think our retail prices are still going up so much? Is it really all still because of the war?
Well, the biggest issue, Andrew, and Happy New Year to you too, the biggest issue is supply. The world just doesn't have enough hydrocarbons to fuel the post-COVID recovery, and that's what pushed prices up. Prices for gas were going up well before the invasion of Ukraine. As you've correctly pointed out, gas prices just before Putin invaded Ukraine in our region, in the Asian region, were $39 a gigajoule, or at least that's the figure the government uses, the ACCC uses, to average out the Asian gas prices here. $39 a gigajoule, just keep that in mind. By Christmas last year, by December last year, at the time Labor announced this unprecedented socialist-like gas price caps, the price had actually fallen to $33 a gigajoule over that 9-month period. Yet the Labor Party were blaming all of the gas price increases, the high gas prices, on Vladimir Putin. Clearly wrong. The problem is that in our country in particular, we don't have enough electricity supply when it's very, very cold or very, very hot. And so we increasingly have to use gas to generate electricity more than we did before. And that's putting extra burden on our short gas supplies. And so this comes back to our failure to invest in reliable baseload electricity. And I really, really worry what's coming forward in the next few months when the Liddell coal-fired power station shuts. This government has no plan for that, except apparently to ramp up the socialism, ramp up the communism, and we all know how this story ends.
Yes, and let's not forget that the Victorian government, the Labor government there, banned all kinds of gas exploration on land for nearly a decade before partially relaxing that ban. Now, part of the problem is, it seems to be that Labor has made things worse with this cap. The big gas producers say they've been spooked by its new laws, it's this cap on prices, and its threat to fine them $50 million if they don't sell their gas at the government's price. Here's the Executive Vice President of one of our biggest producers, Woodside, talking earlier on Sky News to Edward Boyd.
What we have done is delayed execution of some agreements that we were looking to put in place for 2024, pending certainty on the mandatory code of conduct. I mean, we were ready to sign those contracts just before Christmas, but including at buyer requests, we sought just to get that certainty, but we have every intention to put that volume into the market in 2024 to help alleviate the supply constraints that we're seeing.
Matt Canavan, this is incredible. Woodside, one of the biggest gas producers, saying it won't put in extra gas for another year. Now, I've got to ask, though, do you think this is gas producers going on strike in protest of the government's price cap?
Well, I think it's just the normal and expected outcome of trying socialist-like policies, Andrew. We see this all the time when the government comes in and tries to force companies to eat their vegetables, so to speak. They find ways of not doing that. And perhaps the biggest difference between our side of politics, when we're strongly defending conservative values, and the left and Labor side of politics is we understand incentives. We understand that in a market economy, in a free society, you have to encourage people to do things. You have to find ways to make people do good things that are in their own best interests too. Whereas the left side of politics, as we've seen the last few months, default back to a level of control and government dictate and think they can just tell everybody like a massive chessboard in the economy what to do. It always fails. And so that's what's happening here. The gas producers are not going to play ball, and you're going to see perhaps the Labor Party double down even more and more before they realise it's all failed. You've read out the increase in prices that are higher than expected. Another big fail already for the Labor Party is the fact that electricity future prices have already risen since the gas price caps came in. Now, you've got to be careful interpreting futures prices, but it is a bit of an indicator. They were trumpeting the fact that future prices had fallen a month or two ago. They've been very quiet about that in the last month. Future prices now for electricity for the rest of this year are higher than they were when they announced their gas price caps last year. This is looking like an impending disaster for our country, and the sooner the Labor Party wakes up to themselves and scraps these 1970s-like policies, the better chance we have of not having 1970s-like outcomes.
Well, don't forget, this year is when the Liddell Power Station, New South Wales, the giant one there, is going to finally close completely. So that's going to put more stress on the system. Before you go, Matt, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says, we have to have a voice, a kind of advisory parliament just for Aborigines, and we have to write it into our constitution. We're going to be voting on that probably end of the year. But if we do need this voice so much, why wouldn't Albanese say last night in his interview here with Chris Kenny that it's still set up this voice just by passing, normal law in Parliament, even if Australians voted no in the referendum to putting it in the Constitution? Here he is.
If it failed, would you legislate a voice anyway?
I'm not contemplating failure here.
If the referendum failed, you'd want to legislate a voice anyway. You can do that. Why wouldn't you do that? If you believe in a voice, regardless of the referendum, you'd have to legislate one. The former government could have done that at any stage.
The Prime Minister also refused to answer that question today with Ben Fordham and 2GB. Why is that? That we've got to have it in the Constitution. Otherwise, well, he can't even commit to just having it normally. What is that?
Well, it's just a remarkable level of out of touchness from this Prime Minister. He seemed almost contemptible to those interviewers daring to question him on The Voice, reasonable questions. I think we might look back on these pair of interviews started by Chris Kenny on Sky last night. We might look back on these interviews as the birthday cake moment for the Voice proposal. This is so bad, the communication around this is, I think, resonated with Australians in a way that they perhaps haven't woken up to the Voice yet, and saying that the Prime Minister can't answer basic questions about this. He's going to ask us a Clayton's referendum. He doesn't really care about our views, apparently, because he might just go and do it anyway. So what's the whole point of this? And I think in our country we tend to not take very kindly to be treated like mugs, as the PM's clearly doing. And then further on in those interviews that you've alluded to, Andrew, the Prime Minister couldn't answer basic things about how are the Voice members going to be appointed, will they be elected, how much will they be paid, how much is it going to cost us all. We have no idea about these issues, and the basic truth is still true, said about the GST as well, that if you don't know what the details of the proposal is, don't vote for it. And if you did know what it was, you definitely wouldn't vote for it.
Well, on that, whether they're going to get elected, I'm afraid that many are going to get selected. Some of them will select themselves. I read all about it in my column in the News Limited papers tomorrow. This is a fundamentally undemocratic, disgraceful stitch-up. And I don't know why people are so for it. Matt Canavan, thank you so much for your time.